He was just a nobody. A broke filmmaker from Brooklyn with nothing but a script, a pen, and a dream. But instead of giving up, he did something different. He wrote a 30-page letter to Sylvester Stallone. Handwritten, from the heart. No agent, no manager. He never expected a reply. And for 371 days, there wasn't one. But then, Stallone showed up, in person, on his set. What happened next left everyone speechless and changed this young man's life forever. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from. If you love stories of real-life underdogs and second chances, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow at 6 p.m., we've got another story you won't believe. He never expected a reply. Jake Dawson wasn't even sure the letter would make it to the right person, but he sent it anyway. 30 handwritten pages, folded into a padded envelope, addressed in careful block letters to an address he wasn't even sure was valid. Because when you grow up worshiping someone like Sylvester Stallone, not just the icon, not just the underdog champion, but the soul behind the stories, you don't write emails. You write with your whole heart, even if no one reads it. Brooklyn was loud that morning. Delivery trucks groaned across wet asphalt, horns bled into each other like smoke, and the February air bit through Jake's threadbare hoodie as he stepped onto the stoop of the small indie theater where he worked. His hands were raw from the cold, his backpack weighed with notebooks, and his shoes squeaked with every soaked step. He hated the sound. It reminded him how far he still was from making it. But the sound inside his head was louder than any of it. "You're wasting your time." His father's voice. Not cruel, not loud, just heavy. A man who'd tried the same dream and failed. A playwright who'd once had promise, then bitterness, then silence. Jake's phone buzzed. Tessa. Cameras busted again. "I'll be at Film Center over a 1. Bring coffee. Plus black." He typed back, on it. "Also, I may have sent the letter." A few dots appeared, then disappeared, then reappeared. "Tessa. Wait. The letter?" He didn't respond. The letter had started as a joke. A dare between exhausted creatives after too much diner coffee and too many nights watching Rocky Balboa for comfort. Jake had said, "What if I just sent him the story?" Tessa had replied, "What if he actually read it?" And then they'd laughed. Until they didn't. Because somewhere in the haze of doubt, that ridiculous idea had started to feel right. True. Jake wrote it over 3 nights, 30 pages. Not a script, not a pitch, just his truth. About growing up with no one who believed in dreams. About how Rocky made him feel seen. About how he wrote something that wasn't meant for agents or producers or algorithms, but for Stallone. He called the script The Last Fighter. The envelope had been dropped in the blue USPS box outside the Brooklyn Public Library. Jake remembered standing there for a full minute, his fingers frozen to the edge, before finally letting go. That was 371 days ago, and nothing had come back. Inside the projection booth of the indie theater, Jake slumped into the office chair with the half-broken wheel and exhaled. The hum of the ancient reel system buzzed beside him. The place smelled like old popcorn and newer mildew. He stared at the screen on the wall. A black and white indie short was playing, the kind that critics loved and audiences ignored. He whispered to himself, "One day, just one day." But then, the bulb blew. The film jammed. The screen blinked to black. And Jake laughed. One of those laughs that's half frustration, half resignation. Because of course it did. Later that afternoon, in the back room of a run-down gear rental spot off Canal Street, Tessa adjusted the busted red camera while chewing on a straw. Her fingers were grease-streaked, her hair in a messy knot. "You seriously sent it?" she finally asked. Jake nodded. "A year ago, to his production company in LA. And no response? Not even a restraining order?" They both smiled, but only for a second. Tessa's eyes narrowed. "You're still thinking about shelving the film, aren't you?" Jake shrugged. "I mean, "What's the point?" he said. "No one's gonna see it. Half the lights don't work. Our lead actor bailed. We've got a budget of $457 and an expired granola bar." "But we've got a story," she said. "And a reason." Jake didn't respond. The warehouse they used as a set was freezing. The walls were concrete, the windows boarded. A single heater buzzed in the corner like a dying insect. Posters of old boxing films lined the makeshift walls. The ring was made of duct tape and dreams. Jake stood in the center of it one night, alone, mouthing lines to himself. Lines he'd written, lines no one would ever hear. Then he heard it. Not applause, not footsteps. Knocking, slow, heavy, coming from the steel door at the front of the warehouse. He froze. Then he walked. Then he opened it. And for a moment, he couldn't breathe. Because standing there, silhouetted against the winter sky, in a black wool coat, snowflakes on his shoulders, was Sylvester Stallone. Jake blinked. "Hey," the man said, his voice low, gravel thick, familiar like a memory. Jake stepped back. This isn't real." Stallone offered a slight smile. "You write long letters, kid." Jake's mouth hung open. Sylvester Stallone stood under the flickering entrance light like a myth come alive. No cameras, no entourage, just him. And Jake was speechless. "May I come in?" Stallone asked, glancing past Jake into the empty warehouse. Jake stepped aside wordlessly. As Stallone entered, his boots echoed on the cold concrete, and for a moment, the entire world seemed to go silent. Jake shut the door behind them, still unsure if he was dreaming or delusional. Tessa nearly dropped the camera when she saw him. She blinked, then squinted, then whispered, "Jake, is that—" He nodded slowly, his voice finally breaking free. "Yeah, that's him." They didn't ask why he came, not at first. They offered him coffee. He declined. They offered him a seat. He stood. He looked around the set, the duct tape boxing ring, the mismatched lights, the handwritten shot lists. And then he said, "This is real. Not polished, not perfect, but it's honest." Jake couldn't hold it in. "Why are you here?" Stallone looked directly at him. No smile now, no mystique, just a man. "I read your letter," he said. "Took me a while to find it in the chaos, but I did. And I didn't forget it." Jake sat on an overturned milk crate, stunned. Stallone paced slowly around the set, hands behind his back. "You said something in there, about not being seen, about writing for the version of you that was never heard." Jake nodded silently. Stallone stopped in front of a faded poster of Rocky III taped to the wall. "I know that kid," he said. "I was that kid." The rest of the night blurred. Tessa shot everything. Not for the documentary, but because she knew instinctively that this moment would never happen again. Stallone stayed for over an hour. He didn't pitch anything, didn't offer deals. He just talked about failure, about rejection, about writing Rocky in 3 days and sleeping in a bus station. And he asked Jake what The Last Fighter was really about. Jake struggled for words. "It's about someone who fights when no one's watching, who gets up off the mat even when there's no crowd, no bell. Just silence." Stallone nodded. "Then make sure every frame proves that, because that's what matters." After he left, Jake sat alone in the ring. The spotlights buzzed. Snow tapped softly at the warehouse windows. Tessa walked in slowly, camera still rolling. "You okay?" she asked. Jake didn't look up. "I don't know if I can actually finish this now." She frowned. "What do you mean?" Jake shook his head. "It was easier when no one cared. Now, it feels like if I screw this up, it's not just my failure. It's his too. It's everything." Tessa sat beside him. "You wrote the story before he showed up. That was yours. Still is." He looked at her. "I'm terrified." "I know," she whispered. "That's how you know it's real." But then, the next day, the lead actor sent a text. "Can't make it anymore. Something came up. Sorry. Jake stared at the message, the heat draining from his chest. Tessa stood behind him, reading over his shoulder. Now what? He didn't answer. Therefore, he made a choice. Jake stepped into the ring. Tessa adjusted the lights, and they started filming, with Jake as the lead. He wasn't an actor. He barely knew the lines. But it wasn't about performance anymore. It was about ownership, about facing down everything that told him he wasn't enough, and standing there anyway. Later that night, while reviewing footage, Jake's phone buzzed again. Unknown number. A voicemail. He played it. Stallone's voice filled the room. Hey Jake, I've been thinking about what you said. That stuff about not being seen, about writing for ghosts. I get it. I really get it. I just wanted to say, don't worry about the noise. Just tell your truth. That's the fight worth showing. Jake sat still for a long time, the screen frozen on his own face in mid-punch. Then he hit delete on the text from the actor and pressed play on the next take. 2 weeks later, they wrapped the final scene. It was rough, imperfect, but real. Jake walked through the empty set that night, his coat dusted with sawdust and fake blood. He found the original copy of his letter. He'd printed a second draft for himself just in case. He read it again. Every sentence felt like a younger version of himself screaming into the void. And now, that voice had been heard. The next morning, Jake's estranged father showed up at the theater. He looked older, more tired, a limp in his step that hadn't been there before. I heard Stallone came by, he said, not making eye contact. Jake didn't respond. His father exhaled. I used to dream too, you know. Just thought you should know. Jake stared at him for a long moment. Do you want to see the film? He finally asked. His father blinked. Would that be okay? Jake nodded slowly. Yeah, it would. The theater was nearly empty. Only 10 seats filled. All friends, a few family members, one local blogger who promised to maybe write about it. It was the first and only screening of The Last Fighter. The projector whirred. The sound crackled. On screen, Jake, nervous, shaky, but committed, took punch after punch in a DIY ring built from recycled mats and stubborn belief. He fought. Not like an actor, not like a hero, but like someone who needed the world to see he hadn't quit. In the back row, Jake sat beside his father. They hadn't spoken much since he arrived. The silence between them wasn't angry. It was old, rusted, and that night, it was louder than ever. Halfway through the film, his father leaned over and whispered, "You're better than I was." Jake didn't look at him, but something inside him shifted. After the film ended, there was no standing ovation, just a handful of quiet claps, a few nods, some tears. Jake didn't care. He'd finished it. Not perfectly, not professionally, but truthfully. Tessa hugged him outside the theater. Her eyes were red. "You did it," she whispered. Jake shook his head. "We did it." And then, she pulled out her phone. "There's something you need to see." She opened an app, pulled up an Instagram post, verified account, with a Sly Stallone photo, a behind-the-scenes shot of Jake in the ring. Caption: I met this kid who wrote me a letter, 30 pages, handwritten. He told me he didn't want fame, just to be heard. So I listened. This is what fighting looks like when no one's watching. He the last fighter, keep punching. The post had over 1.2 million likes. Jake stared at the screen, then at the comments. Where can we watch this? This story just saved my night. Stallone showing up like a true legend. I needed this, thank you, Jake. Jake blinked rapidly. He posted it? Tessa smiled. You're not invisible anymore. Therefore, emails started coming in. First from indie film blogs, then from YouTube creators, then a message from a streaming platform scout. Not a deal. Not money, just, can we talk? Jake sat in his tiny apartment that night, floor scattered with pages from old notebooks, and stared at his laptop. He wasn't sure what came next, but for the first time, the silence didn't feel like rejection. It felt like space, a wide, open space, waiting for a voice. But then came the challenge he never saw coming, a call from Stallone's assistant. "Hi, Jake. Mr. Stallone wanted to invite you to a roundtable event in LA for up-and-coming filmmakers. He thinks your story would inspire them." Jake's heart leapt. "Seriously?" "Seriously. The flight's covered. So is lodging. It's 3 days from now." He hung up the phone in a daze. He turned to Tessa. "We're going to LA." She grinned. "Time to see what happens when your dream calls back." 3 days later, Jake stood on the Warner lot. A lanyard hung around his neck. His palms were sweaty. The room was full of faces he'd only seen in IMDb bios and movie credits. At the far end of the table, Stallone. Jake took a deep breath and walked in. Stallone greeted him with a handshake and a pat on the back. Then something unexpected happened. "Jake, I want you to meet someone," Stallone said. He gestured to a man beside him. A veteran producer, former Oscar winner, quiet, sharp eyes. "This is Will DeMarco. He's looking for new voices. I told him about yours." Jake swallowed hard. "Nice to meet you, sir." Will studied him. "I saw your film. It wasn't polished, but it was honest. That's rarer than you think." Jake blinked. "You watched it?" He nodded. "Twice." That night, Jake couldn't sleep. The hotel room was too nice, the bed too soft, the air too quiet. He stood on the balcony, looking at the glowing city below. Then he saw the letter, the original one. Tessa had secretly packed it in his bag. Jake opened it, read it, and cried. The next day, Stallone pulled him aside. "I want to tell you something," he said. "You said you wrote that letter not to be seen, but to remember who you were." Jake nodded. Stallone continued. "When I read it, I wasn't sure if I wanted to come. I was afraid. Afraid I'd see a kid like I used to be, hungry, full of pain, asking for something I couldn't give." Jake stood still. Stallone's voice dropped lower. "But when I watched your film, I didn't see a kid needing help. I saw a fighter, and I saw someone I could believe in." He paused. "And that helped me more than you'll ever know." Jake stared at him, stunned. "You're the reason I became a filmmaker," Jake said. "And you're the reason I remembered why I did," Stallone replied. Later that night, Stallone gave him something, a small box, inside, a pair of worn boxing gloves, signed, faded, the same gloves from his personal Rocky memorabilia. "Not because you need them," he said, "but because you earned them." Back in New York, Jake returned to the warehouse set, alone. He hung the gloves on a nail above the ring, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of every silent night, every no, every voice that said, "You're not enough," and of the one voice that finally said, "You are." The gloves stayed on the wall. Jake never moved them, never touched them again, not because they were sacred, but because they had already done their job. 2 months later, Jake sat alone in the same projection booth where it all started. Only this time, it wasn't a student film on the screen. It was The Last Fighter, streaming on a mid-tier platform, newly released to modest but enthusiastic reviews. User comments scrolled beside the video. "This hit me harder than any blockbuster this year. Felt like someone made a movie about my inner war. Thank you for telling this story." Jake didn't smile. He just breathed. He still worked at the theater part-time, still walked the same cracked sidewalks of Brooklyn, still wore the same hoodie, now more patched than whole. But something had changed. He didn't feel invisible anymore, not because he was famous, but because he was finally seen by someone he'd admired, yes, but more importantly, by himself. And then, an envelope arrived. Thick, cream-colored, no return address. Inside, an invitation, The Sundance Emerging Voices program, selected, accepted, flight and lodging included. Jake stared at it for a long time, not because he doubted it, but because for the first time, he didn't need it to know he was real. He still accepted it, of course, but this time, it wasn't about proving anything. It was about building something. 1 week before leaving for Utah, Jake visited his father. They hadn't spoken since the screening, not because of bitterness, but because words had become unnecessary. His father sat on the porch, a blanket over his legs. Jake handed him a copy of the film's official poster. Folded, weathered, signed by Stallone. And below that, signed by Jake. "You want me to hang it?" his father asked. Jake smiled. "No, I want you to keep it. For the version of you that needed it back then." His father nodded. "You came further than I ever did." Jake placed a hand on his shoulder. "You helped me more than you know." At Sundance, Jake didn't wear anything special. No fancy jacket, no styled hair. He carried the same notebook he'd used since the beginning, filled with scraps, ideas, dialogue fragments, and taped to the back cover, a photocopy of his letter to Stallone. Not as a token, but as a compass, a reminder that stories start long before anyone listens, and sometimes the silence is the story. During a panel, an aspiring screenwriter asked, "How do you know when it's time to give up?" Jake paused, then answered, "You don't. That's the secret. You never really know. But sometimes, if you write the truth and fight the quiet long enough, it answers you back. And that's when you keep going." That night, Jake received one last voicemail from Stallone. "Hey kid, I watched it again. You found something in there, something real. Keep chasing that. Most people spend their whole lives trying to remember what made them dream in the first place. You held onto it. That's rare. Proud of you." Jake saved the message. Not for fame, not for proof, but for the nights ahead. The nights when the world goes quiet again, because the silence always returns. And so do the doubts, and the voices, and the closed doors. But now Jake knew something he didn't before. He could survive it. Not by yelling louder, but by writing clearer, fighting smarter, standing still when the world rushed past him. He wrote his next script by hand, not because it was trendy, but because it hurt his wrist and slowed his mind, just enough to feel every word. And he mailed a copy, not to a star, not to a studio, but to himself, so that he'd never forget what it cost to believe. In the final scene of The Last Fighter, Jake's character gets knocked down one last time. No music swells, no crowd cheers. He lays on the mat, eyes closed. Then, slowly, he rises, staggers, bleeding, barely standing, but smiling, because he's not fighting for the world anymore. He's fighting for the boy who still lives inside his chest, the one who wrote 30 pages by hand and believed someone might care enough to read them. He never expected a reply, but he wrote it anyway. And maybe that's how every great story begins, not with applause, but with a whisper in the dark that dares to speak anyway. Thank you so much for watching. Your time means everything to us, and we hope this story moved you as much as it moved us. If it did, please consider leaving a comment, sharing the video, and subscribing to the channel, because powerful stories deserve to be heard. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and never underestimate the impact of one small act of courage.